So hi, everyone. My name is Amherst Williams, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of History Organizations. I want to welcome you to our second virtual colleague circle on collecting COVID-19. And just because we have such a large group here, we're just asking, if you're not speaking, to please mute your audio and consider turning off your video unless there's a reason for people to be seeing you, just to kind of help with bandwidth for everybody. I'm really pleased to welcome you all here. We have a great program today, I think, talking about something that we're really trying to do with these colleague circles, which is sort of offer things in rapid response to what's going on right now. And obviously, many organizations across the state of Connecticut and across the country are involved in active collecting projects right now around the coronavirus pandemic. So it's great to be able to do this. I just want to offer a few announcements from the League before we get started. I'd also like to draw your attention to our next colleague circle in 2 weeks, where we'll have Dr. Leah Glazer, Professor of History and Coordinator of the Public History Program at Central, to talk with us a little bit about digital and remote internships. You know, thinking about how to, if you have relied on interns in the past or are thinking about trying to reach out to a student, a public history student, and get some work done at your organization, this is a great opportunity to think about how we might do that in a moment of social distancing. So you can sign up for that on our website. And many of you saw the email that we sent out at the end of the day yesterday. I just wanted to introduce the other major program, virtual program that we're launching right now over the course of the summer, which is really sort of a revamped, because we were forced to cancel our in-person annual conference this year at Central. We've basically transformed many of those conference sessions into virtual Zoom webinars, $5 a session. Wednesdays at 1, all summer long, starting next week, June 10th, where we'll be talking about historic gardens. You can see the full schedule here and learn more on our website at clho.org/summer school. And because we know that many organizations have been impacted by, financially by the coronavirus pandemic, we'll also offer a free registration code for those of you who need that. I'm happy to take any questions at the end if you have any questions about upcoming League programs. But as we begin to get started, I just want to hand things over for a moment to Julia Nabel from Sandor Max, which is an organization that does exhibit design and museum marketing. So I want to hand it over to Julia for a moment. She can share a little bit more about what they do.
Great. Thank you, Amherst, and we're thrilled to be here today. My partner, Zoltan, is also sitting in on the call, and we're thrilled to be a sponsor of today's event and to start our involvement with the League. I'm a founding partner of Sandor Max. We're a creative agency. We're based right here in Connecticut, and over the last 15 years or so, we've been working with cultural organizations, museums, towns, tourism groups to create awareness for their organizations and grow their audiences. But today I have a very quick, I think it's 42 seconds, overview of specifically our museum exhibit design services. And again, we really appreciate your time and we're delighted to be here. So here we go. I will take over. Is it okay now? Okay, great. And we'll just move this, and here we go. Okay, thank you. We need some music on that, I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thanks
you for
again to
having me.
Sandra Max, and congratulations to you folks and the folks at the Gun Museum on the recent exhibit. We'll be featuring the work that they did with the Gun Historical Museum on their exhibit as a part of one of our summer school sessions, if you folks are interested in learning more about that.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'd like to turn things over to our board president, Beth Rose, who is really responsible for organizing the session and bringing together the folks who you'll be hearing from. Beth?
Great, thanks so much, Amrus, and great to have so many people on this call. As a colleague circle, this is meant to be more of an informal discussion, so we are going to hear from three people at the beginning here, but then we'd like to open it up to you. I know there's a number of organizations around the state that have launched COVID collecting initiatives, and so my hope for this session was really that it would be an opportunity for people to share what their experience has been and any tips that they might have for others. So we'll ask if you would like to share something and you're on a computer, you can use the chat function. Please just type in there, I'd like to share something, and Amrus or I will call on you. That seemed to be the best way to manage discussion this size. And then we can be a little more informal as we go along. So just to let you know who you're going to be hearing from, first up we're going to have Molly Woods from the Connecticut Historical Society. And she is a research and collections associate there at CHS. And I understand she's been heading up the COVID collecting project there. So Molly, we need to unmute you, right?
Hi everyone, my name is Molly Woods and my title has actually changed this year to registrar. At the CHS, we launched a collecting portal for COVID at the beginning of April on our website, chs.org/COVID-in-CT. And our mission is to tell the story of Connecticut. So we're hoping with this portal to collect stories from all over the state, from people of all backgrounds, people who work in the healthcare industry, they're essential workers, people at home. We want every story from every type of person in Connecticut. And so the types of materials that we're looking for are photos, videos, stories from people, articles they may have written for local newspapers, art, poems, and even emails. And we are going to collect 3D material as well. We're not doing that yet since we're still working remotely, but once we get back on site, we'll really ramp up collecting 3D materials. And so through the portal, people have to check off that they're giving us title and copyright, and that we can manipulate the files so that they can be reformatted as file types change. And so that's kind of been a challenge for us at the beginning, was figuring out how to do ownership and copyright, because you can't really do the traditional deed of gift. And so we have a statement that everyone has to check. It's required to submit the form. And so far that's been working for us. And once we decide what is going into the permanent collection, we may decide to send out traditional deeds of gift as well, but that hasn't been decided. And this response to our portal has been pretty good. We have received over 140 submissions so far. Most of that has been photos, so we've received over 200 photos, and probably at least 10 videos, and probably about 20 stories. So seeing those numbers, that is one of the challenges, is that we want more stories, because those are just as important, if not more important, than photos. So that's been one of the challenges. And I know at the beginning they had mentioned a partnership with CCSU. So that partnership will help to get more stories. So that's the details of that are still being worked out, but we do plan to be more active and intentional with our collecting. And we've also had teachers reach out to us about students submitting their work. And so that made us realize that we needed to have a release form for minors, because on our website, we are only allowing people who are 18 or older to submit things. And so we created this minor form to send to teachers. And that will be going up on our website so that people in their families can submit things, but that's not on the website just yet. And so far that we've had good response to that and not too many questions about it either, so that's good. And then I would probably end this by saying that we know that even though this is a rapid response collecting initiative, we know that it's going to be a long-term collecting initiative, because COVID isn't just going to end next month or at the end of this year. It's going to keep going on. And as people reflect on their experiences and as more things happen in the world, they'll really understand the impact on their lives. So we know that more stories will come in the future once people have really been able to absorb what's happening in their lives and in the world.
Great, thank you, Molly. I'd meant to say at the beginning that when Amherst and I were talking about this yesterday, we also wanted to expand the scope a little bit to say that this is also a time when organizations might be thinking about collecting materials related to the protests that have, been seen across the country in the past couple of weeks. And I think a lot of the issues that could relate to collecting in a rapid response sort of way could be very pertinent to that as well. I want to introduce sort of a special guest, Carolyn Klibanoff from the Made by Us project at the National Museum of American History. And thanks to Zoom, we are able to bring people in from outside of Connecticut, which is exciting. Carolyn was previously an exhibitions manager at the MIT Museum, and she's worked at other cultural heritage organizations, and she'll be able to tell you more about the Made by Us initiative. We're also going to have a special summer school session with her later in the summer, so you can really learn more about it then. But I know that she's been kind of tracking COVID collecting projects across the country, and so I thought she might be able to speak to us from that perspective.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. It's really great to be able to share more about what we're doing and learn more about what you're all working on. I think that 2020 has presented many opportunities for rapid response collecting and has actually really pushed the boundaries of what we're used to being able to do and the capacities that cultural heritage organizations have. Made by Us, just briefly, is a coalition of now 65 cultural heritage and civic engagement organizations that are teaming up to increase that capacity, because we recognize not one institution can do it alone and can whip these new programs together overnight. So we're trying to collaborate and share what we're learning with each other and spin up new ways to reach younger generations specifically. So it's been a very big week for us since we're focused on democracy and history. But when we began to see a lot of our Made by Us partners collecting around COVID-19, collecting stories, videos, there was such a range of approaches and a range of tools that they were using to do it, that we felt that we, Made by Us, could be of service if we were to gather all of those together, not only for the public who could then go find a cultural institution near them that wanted to hear their story, but also for the institutions themselves, because we were seeing that, a historical society in Wisconsin learned from the Cambridge Historical Society in Massachusetts that they mimicked their Google form for collecting these stories. And that's great. That's a great thing to see, that type of collaboration. But someone needed to facilitate that so it could happen more broadly. So I will just share my screen briefly, and I'll show you what we came up with. Let's see if I can do this. Here we go. Okay, this is working, right?
Yeah.
So I started just personally, just Googling COVID-19 story collecting initiatives, pulling them into this very simple spreadsheet, organization, link, and the address. And then I put them into this map that now has 400 initiatives across the US. Now that wasn't all me, for sure. I just started the framework. And we were able to share this on social media so that more organizations could use a form to submit their collecting initiative. And then we teamed up with the International Federation for Public History. They were doing the same thing. They had their own map. They saw our map and they said, is this just for the US? And I said, I have just been doing the US, but if you have another map, let's combine. And that's how we got to 400 initiatives. So if you zoom in anywhere on the map, you can start to see all of these dots populate. You can zoom into where you are. Here we go. The High Desert Museum in Bend, Oregon is collecting stories. You can go to this link and learn more. So that way, there's something here for the public in terms of find a place near you because your voice matters. And there's something for institutions to say, well, how are they doing it at this place? We're a similar size. How are they getting this together overnight? At the National Museum of American History, where I work, it's an enormous institution. There are, a lot of resources, but there's challenges in harnessing those resources quickly to do a collection project like this. So in this case, this was where larger museums actually had a lot to learn from smaller institutions who could quickly spin up a platform like this. So we felt like sharing this was a great resource for everyone. And even now, this is sort of a collection itself. It's how did cultural institutions respond in this moment? And I feel that, as we're adding more and more, it shows you that the spread of COVID and the stories and the lives that it affected is so different from place to place. It's such a local story. And that's why collecting every story possible really matters. Now, I'm not an archivist. I don't know about keeping every story for all time, forever and ever. And I'm sensitive to the challenges of that work. But at least the chance for people to share their voice has been really important. And we've seen some really amazing stories and moments come out of that.
Thank you. Carolyn, if people wanted to see that map, is there a link that you could share with us?
Yes, let me drop it into the chat.
Thank you. While she's doing that, I'd like to introduce Mike Kemezis, who's the repository manager of the Connecticut Digital Archive at UConn Libraries, and has past experience in archives at a couple different kinds of institutions. And he has pulled together some possible resources for what to do with the stuff once you get it, I guess I could say.
No, thank you. Thank you, Beth, and thank you for having me. And Caroline was a really good intro about kind of collecting initiatives. And what we've been trying to do as the Connecticut Digital Archive is to provide information about how to go about, because since we're mostly digital, how to go about collecting digital things proactively. Also kind of thinking about going to what Molly said a little bit about the scope of your collecting and looking at all these resources that are out there that might seem foreign to people, or it's kind of drinking from a fire hose, right? So I've been on a lot of listservs. I've been on a lot of Twitter threads, especially when this first started. Someone's looking for help and someone would send them to the SAA guide to rapid collecting. You need to be an archivist kind of to understand all of that. And most people aren't. Same thing with the University of Virginia has a great rapid response program that they made out of, I believe it was a Mellon grant. There's a lot of information there. So what we've been trying to do is to kind of distill that into bite-sized pieces for people and, hey, here's what you need to think about. And I'll share links with this in the chat, but kind of here's this huge guide on rapid response. What does that mean for me in Connecticut? What does that mean for me as a historical society? What should I be thinking in terms of resources? What about digital backups? Do I have to worry about that? So we kind of try to approach it in that way. and help people make decisions early on in the process, you know, to get your content into a digital repository. Because just listening to Molly and what she's been doing, that's a lot of work. They're putting a lot of work into this. You're putting a lot of work into this. And you want to make sure that, you know, that work pays off. You want to make sure that it's accessible, because we're talking about telling the story of COVID. How are we going to tell the story 25 years from now? How are we going to tell the story 50 years from now or more? You know, and looking at the influenza epidemic back 100 years ago, we have resources on that for a number of reasons, for archivists, for people doing oral histories. You know, how are those still accessible, and how do we kind of do that in a digital age? And that's kind of the experience and the view we're taking on that. And we're here as a resource for people, because that's how we think at the Connecticut Digital Archive. We have to think as futurists. We have to think of how can we make this content available for forever, you know, whatever that means. How do you make sure people can still learn what it was like living in Connecticut in 2020 when all this crazy stuff is going on? So that's kind of where we're at, trying to help people with tools, workflows. We work with Greg Colati, who oversees the program. He's been doing digital archives for over 30 years. So we've seen a lot of digital projects. And the same thing going to Caroline, there are people doing similar things around the state that aren't talking to each other because they don't know. So we kind of want to act as that kind of hub, along with the CLHO, along with CHS, along with these national organizations, to say, look at these other institutions of your size and what they're doing. Here's how they're able to do it. So that's, you know, I think we go hand in hand with Caroline. We're a little more local focused, right? But I think we also bring that kind of digital thing, is like, how do you digitally capture these things? And we can talk about that, you know, as they come up. And it's all about resources and what you're able to do and what you really want to do. I think a lot of people want to capture everything. It's easy, right? Digital is easy. Just take it all. And that's not the case. You need to have like an archivist outlook on it. So, you know, we'll touch on that too. So thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to see all the interest in this.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks to our speakers for keeping things very brief so that we have time to hear from the rest of you as well. I would note, if anyone has any questions, especially for Caroline, she's going to have to leave the meeting a little bit early to move into her next giant meeting. So please use the chat if you have any questions you'd like to pose to her in particular. But we'd love to hear from you. What does your organization currently doing a COVID collecting project? I'm very curious what response you've gotten, if so. Does it seem like people are really eager to submit things, or does it take a little bit more work? And what are maybe some of the challenges of that? So I'm seeing that Christine Boulay would like to speak. Would you like to go first?
Great, thank you very much. Christine Boulay here. I'm the local history coordinator for Derby Public Library. We have been documenting the pandemic, or I should say, I've been trying to, since the beginning of April, end of March, when this whole thing started. Few things that we've done is I have gone around town and I have taken photographs myself, and it's been really interesting. Everybody's very receptive. When I tell them what I am doing and why I am taking photographs, they're all like, sure, this is great. We would love to have you do this for us. I'm trying to get an array of photographs of what the town looks like. You know, we're the smallest town in the state of Connecticut. Interesting photo. I took a picture of Elizabeth Street, which is a main drag, not a single car on it. You know, just eerie and different things like that through this whole pandemic. Now, we are also doing a COVID survey or questionnaire, and we have that on our website. I have emailed it to every employee in the city of Derby. Responses are not what I would like them to be, unfortunately, but the questionnaire, it's very interesting on the questionnaire, some of the answers that we're getting, and how most people, they know what they need to do. They're accepting it, but there is a little bit of loneliness, missing of loved ones, how it has changed their lives as far as work goes. I mean, myself, I've been working from home for the last, 10, 12 weeks. Fortunately, I'm able to do that. And we are going back to work as of Monday, skeleton crew, no patrons. You know, so I'm just finding that, and I don't want to say that this is exciting, it's probably not the right word. I'm finding this extremely interesting and informative by going around and doing what I'm doing and collecting the information.
Great, thank you. And I think that sort of raises a question for me of how proactive do we as these organizations need to be in doing this documentation, you know, in this case, Christine's sort of doing it herself, as opposed to asking the public to contribute on their own. And I wonder if you know, if in some cases people are like too overwhelmed with just living through this time to be able to really reflect, as Molly was saying, you wished you were getting more stories proportionally to photographs. I just wonder if there's a sort of a lag time that it takes people to sort of catch up to the experience that we're actually having to be interested in documenting it. I think we had a offer from Brian to talk about your experience at CCSU.
Yeah, so thanks for organizing this. It's great hearing from people and great sharing. Yeah, so at Central, as you mentioned up at the top, I'm working with Professor Leah Glazer and other professors in the history department to create an archive of the CCSU community's experience of the pandemic. And so what we did was we put a web page up on the library's website, which I can put in the comments here in the chat. And that was a call. I put that together just modeling it off of what other university libraries had been doing. I did a bunch of searches around online, and I think I noticed it seemed like University of North Carolina, Charlotte was sort of the first out the gate, and then a lot of other university libraries were sort of imitating what they were doing. So the language from that call is pretty much lifted from what UNC Charlotte did, and then also that links to a Google or a Microsoft form, which is how we're actually ingesting materials. And so that link was sent out to the university community. And as for responses, we were not great on timing. We ended up putting it out during finals week, which we had gotten our act together a couple weeks earlier. I think our responses would have been better. But we had a lot of initial responses that then dropped off. But you know, I've since been in contact with a lot of individual professors, particularly in the journalism department. And so we're working on collecting everything that the student newspaper's been doing, as well as the student literary magazine has been collecting stories as well. So we're partnering with them to archive. And then we're planning on doing a sort of second push in August once students start checking their emails again to try to get more student submissions of their stories. And I'm also following various social media sites and trying to grab digital ephemera that universities' social media accounts are posting as well.
Thanks very much, Brian. And I see that Anne has, sort of along those lines, talked about looking at local Facebook groups to see who's posting about COVID, and then posting herself that the museum is collecting for COVID. So that's a little bit, you know, on the going out to find stuff on your own, and we also have a question about sort of technically how do we deal with social media posts. But let's hold on to that for just a sec. I think there was a question about from Lori. You said you had some questions. All I see is Lori's iPad, so I don't know who. I don't know.
Okay. Yes. I'm from Rocky Hill Historical Society in Amherst. We had a very good meeting a few months before all this happened, right? Just as it was starting to happen. And because we are such a small place, there's under 10 of us. Everyone is gung-ho on giving what happened in the 2018. But I can't draw people in to realize that even though that's history, that's past history, and we need to, you know, and I'm having a hard time getting people to realize that in 100 years from now, somebody's going to want to know what went on in our pandemic. They were, you know, and so how do I have a double problem. And first of all, to get my own people on board, and then to get others. And how do I, you know, indulge into this? And will you send some links after that? Like I noticed Carolyn had some links, and how will that work? Will there be some in emails that you'll send us some information also?
Amherst, do you want to speak to that? Yeah, I think we can send out some information, and
Okay.
you see that Amherst and her assistant have also been compiling a list for our website of different organizations that are collecting. So you might look at some of those different projects, and we can also send that out with the links that are in it.
Yes, and as I mentioned at the top, we're also going to be recording this, and we can make the chat available as part of that as well. So you know, you can save it on your own, but we'll also be recording that. So because it's clearly such an important resource.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Carolyn's still here. Carolyn, would you be able to speak a little bit to why your initiative felt it was important, and maybe help people, you know, like Laurie is saying here, who need some convincing about why it's important to collect this material now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Made by Us is so focused on millennials and Generation Z, and, you know, because look around, like, they're not the most engaged generation with our institutions. Not to say that they don't want to be or they can't be, but so we think about this all the time. How do you make history relevant to young people today and to all people? And a lot of that comes from helping people understand that they are part of the story. I saw we called our map, "You Are the Primary Source." We saw some language around that on social media where people were saying, kids were saying, well, I guess we're the primary source. They're going to be studying us in history class. And I think it's really important to understand that our actions today are what we will learn about in the future. And our stories today have the chance to be what people study in the future. And it doesn't have to be just, you know, the great men of history, but actually the more that you contribute to the historical record, your voice will be shared, your story will be shared, your community will be part of the story. So we try to drive that home. I think the other thing I just wanted to share that I saw that worked well is going back to the Cambridge Historical Society in Massachusetts, where I used to do a lot of volunteer work. They have taken some of the submissions that they've gotten and printed them out and posted them in empty, closed up storefronts all over town. Because, you know, the businesses are closed, but people are still going on walks. They're seeing their neighborhood in a fresh way. And then when you see other examples of what people have shared, you start to see that you have a story to tell too, especially if you disagree with what's being shared. And, you know, that's not my experience. I have something else to say. So I think that's a way to take it beyond the digital too, and to bring it into community spaces, even when people, you know, places aren't open yet.
Great, thank you so much. We had a question from Mary to speak about New Haven. Mary, would you like to jump in?
Sure. Sure, I'd be happy to. I hope everyone can hear me. So we have a, similar to what everyone else does, we have a link up on our website. We've been sharing it through social media. We have a weekly e-blast to our mailing list. We even got a little bit of local press in the New Haven Register, which is our local paper. It's been going well, but we haven't gotten a lot of responses. And so what I'm sort of hearing from you guys is some really good ideas, and hoping to hear some more about how to get people. We try to keep it as simple as possible because no one wants to spend a lot of time reading a lot or having to click multiple links or anything. So we thought that might help, but we're still kind of looking for good ways to spread the word. One thing we've been doing that's just been fun is our form is like 7 questions, and you can link photos if you want to submit photos as well. We've been taking those photos, sharing them in next week's Facebook posts so people can kind of see, and it's different ages, and sometimes it's the hearts on the door, sometimes it's a lot of people making masks that we put up because that's kind of a fun picture. so it's been interesting, but I guess I'm really just looking for ways to even get more from our community. So.
Great, thank you, Mary. And I think we're seeing a couple comments in the chat that people are having that experience, that it's not like there's a flood of submissions necessarily right away.
And we get that people have other things on their mind as well. So, we're trying to be sensitive to that. We're not going to go bug all our nurse friends when they're doing other things at the moment.
Of course, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you. Sharon Dunphy, I think, wanted to speak. Sharon, are you out there?
Yes, I'm from the Ridgefield Historical Society. I wanted to tell you a project that I think we've had that's very successful, is we decided to do videos. And initially we asked certain people to do 3-minute videos. And we started with our Board of Selectmen, the first selectman, and he actually had COVID. And so we called him on Zoom and asked him to do a Zoom recording. And his recording was absolutely fascinating about what it was like to have the virus. And then he went on to say what it was like running the town. And since then, we have, we've asked for people to submit videos, but we're not very successful at that. But we've contacted a number of people in the community, like someone in our neighborhood was an anesthesiologist for the COVID unit, and another one's a supply-side economist. And we contacted the head of the fire department in charge of ambulances. And I think that we're putting together a very interesting documentary, and it's just not all written, but having the video, it can be very moving experience, listening to those. So, and I think the fact that we got the first selectman on board right away, condoning it, and now I think, and major players in the town doing it, I think it's really sort of started a movement where it's very accepted in our community to help to contribute to this project. So I just want to give a hint. I think that may be a good end.
It's a great idea, and it's also a great way to reinforce to your town leaders what it is that your organization does. That
yes.
Building on what Carolyn was saying, like this is a moment that we're living. It's very clear that we're living through something that's going to be very significant.
And I mean, our email blast had like a 40% open rate or something. So, I mean, we're really hitting it out of the ballpark with this type of programming. So
that's great. I see that Linda Hacking had a question for Molly. Linda, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, hi. Molly.
Oh, Linda, I think we lost your audio for a sec.
Whoops. Sorry about that.
You're good now.
Okay. I was wondering, I think our collections are sort of overlapping because you're collecting for the whole state. So because, like Unionville and Ridgefield and Derby and all these other places are collecting, what we decided to do was when people submit, they give us permission to use the material instead of asking them to give us copyright. Mm-hmm. And we did that because we thought maybe they would also want to contribute the same materials to initiatives like CHS or others. But if you're asking for copyright, what does that mean for them giving it to me too? Does that mean I then can't use it? I think it does. No, it depends who they give it to first, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what it is in the person, and like and I think it's a good chance for institutions to communicate with each other. Like if you have the same thing, like I don't see a problem with both institutions being able to use that photo because it's obviously important to both institutions. So I think that would be fine, but it also, I don't know really how you would track that very well either, knowing if someone donated something to two institutions. So
it's not a question we're asking. I don't know if it's something you're asking.
No, it's not. But it's an interesting thing to think about and something that is definitely complicated.
Could I throw on my copyright hat real quick?
Yeah, please.
So yeah, that's super complicated. One way to get around this, or one way to work within copyright, because it's a minefield, as we all know, is to use Creative Commons licenses, to ask people to license their content they're giving you as CC BY, which means that all they need is the attribution. They would hold on to the copyright, but that means they license you for the lifetime of their document to use how you want to use it. So that might be a little more flexible way, and then they can give that to other institutions as well. So it's a non-exclusive license, but you have the license to do what you need to do with it. Not sure about the file format. That's a whole different thing if you need to migrate things, but for like the actual intellectual content, if they give you the license to do whatever you want with it, a CC BY license, which is the most open license, that would get around this kind of thing, that you're not asking them for the copyright, you're asking for the license to the copyright to do what you want to do with that. So they could submit it to however many people they wanted to under that same license. And then that's pretty much as far, you have the right to do with it as if you own the copyright to it. So that's kind of a thing to think about too. Because yeah, I didn't even think about the copyright implications of all of this stuff until right now.
I think what Linda brought up about having them sign perhaps like a digital use agreement, or so, it's kind of along the lines of what Mike is saying. That might be a more flexible.
Right, and if you have the CC language or the underlying, that's kind of it's been a legal thing, right? Like it's been held up in court that, so it's not just saying you're giving me the rights, it's like you're giving me the rights according to this international body that does this. So yeah, it's super interesting. We don't have a lot of time. We could have a whole series of colleague chats about copyright and CC licenses, but that's one thing to keep in mind as well. We don't want to be restrictive, I don't think. We do want to be proactive, but we don't want to be restrictive to say, you gave me your photo, now it's ours. It's, you gave me your photo, now I have the right to do with it, but you still own the copyright. And again, that might not work in every case, but there are other options out there.
Great. Getting back to a question that Alyssa had posed about what to do with social media posts. Mike, do you have any?
Oh, right, yeah, okay. Right, so I was reading that. We have some resources on that. It's not published yet, I'm still working on it. So social media and web archiving are all about how much capacity you have to use these tools. So there are tools out there. One of them is Doc Now, which is all about capturing Twitter. And that came out of the Ferguson protests a number of years ago. You have to know how to set up a server to use it, right? I don't know if there's a hosting solution, and they make it easy for people like me to do with certain software types. And on top of that, you need to have a Twitter developer API set up. So social media is not as straightforward as web archiving is right now. And web archiving is also kind of a minefield. But at the same time, we are looking at how does the Connecticut Digital Archive implement these things and make them available? Because there is a learning curve. You can't just I can't point you to a website and say, here, use this. There are some low overhead tools. I forget the name of one of them, but it uses a Google form and a Google Sheet. It's pretty simple. The only drawback is it only scrapes Twitter the past 6 to 9 days, as opposed to Doc Now, which can go back on a hashtag for however long you want. So social media is a toughie because you can't, you can point archive it at a social media account, but it's just going to keep going down and down and down until you tell it to stop. It will say, oh, this person commented, let me go grab their profile and everyone that commented on them. So it can get out of control pretty quickly. So we are working on some resources for that. Social media is not easy. I think it's still kind of in the beginning phases. It's still in the hands of developers and very technically savvy people because it's not very easy. And once you do harvest Twitter, it's still not easy to get it to look like a Twitter feed. There are so many rules that Twitter has around their API and how you can use their data. So you really get into it here. So let me just pull up, I had a list of resources so I can just take a quick peek.
Just quickly, Mike, would it be appropriate to say that for people in, without a lot of technical expertise, that it might be best to contact, if you see somebody posting something on Facebook, say that you would like to have for your collection, that you would just contact them and ask that if they could send it to you?
Right, instead of trying to figure out how to crawl the site, I would do that screenshots are good. It's kind of guerrilla archiving in a sense. Just grab that stuff, what you think is really important. The way we is grab it and then figure it out. And there's decisions that you make right now will impact how it's accessible, but you can work on that as well.
Hi, this is Elisa. I'm the one who asked the question. Right now I'm just screenshotting and then sending a form to ask permission to save the photo. It's unfortunate because there's a lot of good comments and stuff, because I work at the Coast Guard Academy, and the cadets are all over the world right now, and they're not in Connecticut, but we still want to capture what's going on within, our community. So, but yeah, that's really the only solution I've come up with, because we don't do any kind of web archiving right now. So
right.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
And that's fine. And a lot of this, and this is like people who want to go be proactive and capture websites, just figure out how to do it. Be proactive. Don't worry about learning the technology. Don't worry about, oh, well, we don't have the right servers, or I don't understand any of this. Don't let that be an impediment. Do what you can. If you think it's really important, screenshot it, save the link. We'll send something about sending it to the Internet Archive, right? The Wayback Machine. There's an easy plugin to do that kind of stuff. So yeah, don't be intimidated by any of this stuff. Try it, do what works for your institution, because that's more important, is capturing that information, right? In any format, any format you can, because it's going to be gone, especially web content. It's going to be gone. If you have a screenshot with a date on it, that's great. So, don't feel like you can't do it. That's my big message about all that kind of web archiving stuff.
That's a great message to take away, Mike. Thank you so much. So we've heard a couple different ideas about sort of proactive techniques. Anne from Unionville, did you want to share a little bit about what you've been doing? I'm not sure if Anne's still with us, but she mentioned, frequenting some Facebook groups where things are being posted and reminding people that the museum is collecting, and also reaching out to just people that are already friends of the museum that are known for taking photographs in their community. I think, some of the benefit of the smaller community-based organizations is that you do have those kinds of community contacts that you can use, as we heard in a couple of instances. Taking pictures yourself, documenting things yourself if you're able to, as you go around in your community. From wearing my hat at the Jewish Historical Society in the Hartford area, we had a volunteer offer to interview people because I was interested in capturing people's sort of Jewish experiences. So relating to Passover, relating to, bar mitzvahs and services that were now being held, remotely. But I didn't get a lot of responses like some of you to a general call. So I think it takes a little bit more kind of grassroots cultivation, if you will. And of course, we're all dealing with a lot of different demands in our organization. So you have to decide what's most important to you. But those are some ideas that I've heard. People have any one or two more questions before we wrap up? Or things to share. If you looked at the map that Carolyn shared that was earlier in the chat, if your organization's not on it and you would like to be, she also shared a form where you can submit that so that you can be part of that cool map around the world. It's pretty impressive to realize that this is going on worldwide, and that also may underline support for, that this is an important thing to do. And we can do it at the local level. We can support what CHS is doing. There's a lot of different avenues that we can use to, to try to capture some of this information. And like I said, I feel like there's going to be also a time when people are going to be processing it a little bit more. And as Molly was saying at the beginning, this is not even though it's rapid response right now, it's probably going to be a long-term collecting thing that we're going to be interested in.
Yeah, if I can just jump in for a second. I mean, one thing that I'm thinking about, given my sort of experience as an oral historian as well, is that oral history is going to be a really great way to, I think, do some documentation around this. Right now may not be the time to do it, but soon might be the time to do it. And now might be a good time to start planning some community oral history projects. It actually might be a great way to engage the local community at a point when they can't really come into history institutions, you know, during closure or partial reopening. That might be something, if people, you know, people have a lot of things on their plates, but, you know, that might be something to think about organizing. It might be a good way to engage a local school or educators or other people in the community to, you know, get people to go out, you know, do a little basic training with some folks on oral history. And, you know, the League has resources that can help you with that. And then send people out and do something that is kind of hits, I think, a nice balance between the sort of crowdsourced kind of collecting that the online forums allow us to do, with a little bit of the curatorial perspective as well, where you're sort of thinking about who you might want to talk to and curating that collection a little bit more actively as well. Also, I mean, I think we've been talking a lot about digital materials. I'd be curious to know, you know, what success people have had in actually collecting physical materials. I know there's been like talk about like, you know, COVID diaries and other things like that. I mean, I'm not recording, you know, I write in a journal with some frequency, but, you know, I'm not on social media and recording things about what I'm feeling on social media. You know, maybe someone, if they wanted to capture my like iMessage or text log, that would be a different story. But I think thinking about some of these, you know, I have this is the Mansfield Historical Society sent out a newsletter, and they, you know, were describing their collecting program on paper and sending that out to people. So I think it's important to think about all the different modes of that kind of collecting, and there may be hopefully physical objects that can be a part of this in the long term as well.
I know some people are definitely collecting masks, for instance.
Yeah,
yeah, that would be a good idea, huh?
That's a
Put
very
a nice-
tangible
yeah.
object, yeah. And one of the things that Carolyn's project was doing on social media was sort of showing you a picture of a bunch of objects and saying like which one should be saved. And that was sort of, you know, getting conversation going online about how we choose to save things and why and so on. And that's, again, it's a way to collect stuff. It's also a way to educate people about what it is that we do. So I think that's very valuable in that sense. We did have one question from Mary about whether anyone was working directly with schools or teachers on this.
We have had some teachers reach out to us. We haven't reached out to any schools, but we do want to get students' perspectives. And so far, I think mostly high schools have reached out. And I know that in the upcoming school year, there's at least one school who's going to require the entire freshman class to keep journals. So we're working with them to hopefully get those journals.
Great, fantastic. And you can see in the chat that somebody was asking, like, does CLHO have a list? And I put our current coronavirus resource page on there, which has a short list, but obviously it's not complete. So I think Amherst is hoping to collect some of your projects from the chat today and update that. And we'd love to make that more complete. And there's an email address, info@clho.org, where you could submit it if you didn't get a chance to put it in the chat today.
Well, thank you. It's 1 o'clock. I thank you all for joining us for our second virtual colleague circle. We hope we'll see you in a couple of weeks to talk about digital and remote internships. And we also hope to see you at some of our summer school programs, my mind. We're hoping to be having also a special colleague circle at some point next week, probably on Thursday, to talk a little bit about reopening. So stay tuned and watch your email for an announcement about that. Thank you all for being here. And if anyone wants to stick around afterwards, has any further questions, I'm going to cease recording. And thank you all for being here, but you're welcome to stick around as well. Thanks.
Thank you.